Okay, so welcome to this session. The title itself is so intriguing. I was telling Fernando that the chapter I had spoken to Fernando, we had finalized the dates, but he was yet to send me the write-up. And on the chapter WhatsApp group, discussion around trauma-informed coaching was already being, people were sharing things. And I said, hang in, we are already planning for a couple of sessions. Today being the first one, unveiling blind spots of the client-coach relationship, trauma-informed coaching. Uh, I hope this is an insightful event where we really deep dive into the intricate dynamics of coaching with trauma-informed lens. Um, I have been a TA student, have dabbled a little bit with trauma, but I am all ears, all eyes to see what this session uncovers. It is intended to be an interactive session. We will be having a couple of breakout activities through the session. And it is for all of us, coaches, therapists, professionals who aim to understand and practice uh, uh, this skill. A little bit about our speaker today. Fernando is the founder of Ignite Global, Evolving Temple and Awaken Mind Guide, an ecosystem of organizations dedicated to harnessing the potential of the human mind for creating, healing, life enhancement, and spiritual development. As the founder of the ICF program, as the founder and the ICF program director of Ignite Global 360, Fernando provides leadership to a comprehensive ecosystem of ICF accredited specialized professional development programs, guiding newcomers to seasoned professional coaches through mastery and beyond. Ignite Global offers comprehensive coach specific education encompassing ICF levels 1, 2, 3, aligned with the ICF credentials, ACC, PCC, MCC, and ACTC. All Ignite professionals partly to the senior practitioner designation with a range of specializations, including generalist coach, executive and leadership coach, group and team coach, coach of modern spirituality. Wow. Leading in foresight and innovation, Fernando introduced two distinct ICF accredited professional coaching qualifications: the trauma-informed psychedelic integration coach certification and the child adolescent development and parenting coaching certification, enriching the spectrum of specialized coaching. So we are all ears, Fernando. It's a pleasure to have you in this session and looking forward to a great conversation.
Thank you very much, Shanti. And also, I would like to first of all thank ICF Bangalore chapter for inviting me and having me here. It's such an honor to be here in your presence. And also, I am really fascinated with the large number of coaches who are here. It's such an honor to be in your presence and share this space. And let's dive in, coaches. So, and also I would like to acknowledge that you are here. The reason being you are curious about how our profession is evolving and also committed to professional development. So this topic, unveiling blind spots of client-coach relationships, especially focusing on trauma-informed coaching, is a topic that is very close to my heart. The reason is that I come from very humble beginnings, and in fact, I have had many traumatic childhood experiences and even adolescence assault. So those experiences led me to be here and share this message with you. And that is why particularly this topic is closer to my heart. So I usually love creating value for our community. Now that you have given me an opportunity to be here and I have your attention, so honoring that attention, I promise to you at the end of this 90 minutes, you will be able to take some key takeaways and immediately apply in your coaching profession. You don't need to be necessarily certified to integrate certain trauma-informed components into the coaching practice. And I believe you will receive some bite-sized pieces that you can already incorporate in your practice. So let's dive in. It's a new arena. It's a new specialization for the coaching world. Only handful of ICF accredited programs are there. Most trauma-informed practices are more in the clinical for clinicians. So this is an exciting moment to be here with you and share this. Now, let's keep in mind that this session content includes some references to themes such as sexual abuse, self-harm, violence, eating disorders, and similar mental conditions. So if you're a highly sensitive person, please engage with caution. And moving forward, I invite you to actively participate while self-reflecting and also engaging in group reflections. We will be inviting you into about size of 3 or 4 in each group. And in case if your group members are not fully active, feel free to self-reflect. And after reflections, to keep the session condensed and also to share as much information as possible with you, I will invite 1 or 2 of you from 1 or 2 groups to share the insights. And when you do that, please keep your sharing concise and let's avoid repetitions. And if you have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat room. Depending on the time, we will try to answer as many questions as possible as well. Right, so what are we going to do today? Let's explore a case study of how trauma affects our coaching clients. So I'm going to share with you a story of one of my clients without mentioning names, with permission. And also I will share with you a very brief introduction to trauma and adversities. And most importantly, now that we're talking about unveiling blind spots in client-coach relationship, let's look at 3 layers of deep listening in trauma-informed coaching. Now, diving in, I would like to invite you to a little mental activity. Now, feel free to send messages in the chat box. Now, when you look at this image, if there's something missing, what do you think missing here? So you are reading my mind, right? So you are saying it's a fish. What kind of fish is missing? Yeah, so I see, and many of you are saying it's a goldfish. You see, you can read my mind. In fact, yes, that's a goldfish. Now, this is not really the mental activity. Here is the mental activity. Now, try not to imagine the fish in the fish tank. Now, I know many of you are having an internal laugh. Now, this is how our mind works. The more we try to not think about something, the more it appears in front of us. Now, think about this as a little icebreaker, and this is going to come up somewhere in the presentation. Right. So let's begin with the group reflection. The reflection is that you work with many clients, and out of the clientele you have, there are few clients or some clients who are unable to achieve the success or expected outcomes from the coaching process. If you have such clients in this breakout room, I invite you to discuss with your clients. What are some of these challenges your clients face? And let's go into the breakout room.
Any questions for Fernando before I open the rooms? Yeah, if none, I'm opening the rooms. Fernando, how much time do we have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, lovely. Opening the rooms now. We'll just wait for others to come back from their breakout rooms, yeah?
3, 2, 1. All right. All right, coaches, welcome back. And I hope you had a good conversation. Right. So we are discussing what are some of the challenges that you notice in your clients when it comes to achieving the success, outcome, or expansion that they are seeking in the coaching process. Now, we would love to hear from one or two of you as the essence of your group discussion. Please raise your hand digitally so I can call one or two of you. So you don't find any challenges in your clients. All right. Sushma, would you like to please
You're on
unmute?
mute, Sushma.
Yeah, thank you. And it was really interesting. And what we felt was, that they don't want to unlearn and relearn, maybe. We felt that the why is not strong enough, that maybe they don't want to self-reflect and they're scared. There's a fear of what might emerge. So pretty much this is the main points. And Smita and me were both in the same room, and she also raised her hand at the same time. So if Smita is there, you want to add anything?
I lowered my hand after you were ordered, so it's okay. Another thing was there is sometimes inaction, no follow-up action, and they just get into their routines, and all the action items get forgotten, and then the desired outcomes are not achieved. So I think, and Sushma covered the rest. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sushma and Smita. Appreciate. I see that many of you raised your hands. To keep the session very condensed and to provide you with more information, I'll ask one more. Mridul, would you like to share?
Thank you, Fernando. Yeah, so our group discussed a couple of points. One was in the beginning of the session, clients do not express, like they don't have enough trust on the coaches. And we also spoke about how they might not be able to trust the coaching process during the whole session, where they are not very open to sharing. This could be one of the challenges. We also spoke on how clients have intellectual understanding of what needs to be done, but eventually, despite their intellectual understanding, they're not able to implement what they already know. For like simple examples being, they know they have to lose weight or how to lose weight, but they can't do it. They know that there are things they need to say no for better time management and not accept all the activities they are given, but they still can't do it. So the difference between intellectual and actual implementation.
Oh, thank you, Mridul. So coaches, those who raised your hand, thank you very much. We will take 2 each time, and thank you for your interest to share. Now, moving forward, I'm hearing something very interesting. They want to, but they can't. When we say they want to, this involves cognition. They think they want to. At the same time, somehow there's a blockage that comes within them that stops them doing. They, in first place, invested in themselves by coming to you because they intended to. They want to create this transformation. So they want to, cognitively, they want to do it. But somehow there are some barriers. And that's exactly what we are exploring today. What might be those barriers? Right. So moving forward, now I invite you to a bit of a self-reflection. Now, as a professional coach, what is your perception on how far the clients have the conscious control over these challenges? Are they able to consciously navigate this, in other words, or are they subconsciously or unconsciously hindered or controlled? Let's take a minute and reflect a little bit. Now, first, bring it into your practice. Think about your own practice, your own clients. So that makes more sense. Think about that specific person who is struggling to achieve a goal. Are they really, are they able to consciously control, or is it somehow subconscious or unconscious blockage? And with that, there's another important question we can reflect on. When client is not achieving desired level of success, do you notice frustration or disappointment in your clients? And perhaps, do you also experience frustration or disappointment? If there are thoughts, feel free to send them in the chat. All right. I'm sure this is a question that you don't have to reflect right now. As a responsible professional coach, you think about this very deeply. So with that, like I mentioned, let's dive into the case study, coaches. I think looking at a case study helps us to understand a real world situation. And in fact, this is one of my clients, as I mentioned, and I think you are not that far from experiencing this either with your clients, I believe. Right. So this is Mike, senior leader in a financial organization. And when he comes to me, as we naturally ask, what is your global goal? If not, what is your expectation from the entire coaching agreement? He tells me that it's actually to increase performance. Well, of course, I know that you will not let go the client with easily like that with just one sentence. You would want to know more from the client. What is it that they are really trying to do? So you start further inquiry. So then Mike tells me that recently that he experienced a mini stroke and he was rushed to the hospital. So you would continue to ask him, so what happened next? So he tells me that there was a mini stroke and he was taken to the hospital, and he recognizes that this comes from all the behavior and habits around him. He's extremely busy. He's always making money. He's extremely stressed with work. There's a lot, never-ending amount of tasks, so that he has to depend most of the time on junk food. He also takes some recreational drugs and alcohol, smoking, so that he can get by. And he also is taking many different types of medicines. So this is his lifestyle. So there was, his ease was disturbed. His ease was disturbed. So he was brought to the doctor, and then the doctor examined him, found out that he's suffering from obesity, anxiety, depression, and related causes. And main cause seemed to be eating disorders. And so they are recognizing the reason why there is eating disorder is because of the stress that he's experiencing. And then doctor points out that stress is truly the root cause. So as usual, you know, our medical systems are usually based on symptom management, and that is also what most patients want, quick recovery. So the doctor gives medicine and bed rest. So then he removes the dis part of the disease. So now he gains the ease. But it doesn't make much difference to him in terms of his lifestyle. So he goes back into his lifestyle as usual. However, this is an intentional leader. So he comes to you as their coach. And then, of course, you are still not satisfied. You want to know more. So you ask, so what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? So the client says, stress, recent procrastination, I avoid meetings and events, and also I have no drive. Now, as I say this, sometimes we ourselves as professionals have been here, and I believe if you are a coach working in an organizational context, you have heard this kind of story. But of course, you are still not satisfied. You want to know more. So you invite the client to share further with you. So client tells you that he has workaholic tendencies. So the work-life balance is disturbed. He's a high achiever, but feeling stressed about his KPIs. And he also says he's not satisfied with himself, his performance. So he feels that he's failing as a CFO. And he says, I know that I'm overweight, but food is my happy place. And he also has a habit of having a drink in the evening, and he sees it as it's for the sleep. And he's frustrated that he can't focus, and he says, it is because I'm procrastinating. And lastly, he also says, no energy for meetings and events. So earlier he said it's performance management, if not performance enhancement. The deeper we go, we see the problem is much bigger. At the same time, interestingly, coaches, at this point of time, Mike sees all of these things as day-to-day normal problems or occurrences. Now, let's do another self-reflection. Have you worked with clients in similar situations? And what are some of the challenges you face in working with such clients? And this invites us to another group reflection. Now, what are some potential underlying mental and emotional challenges Mike might be dealing with? Now, you might immediately say, Fernando, as professional coaches, we don't make judgments. I agree with you, we don't make judgments. At the same time, however, we are trained to listen to underlying meaning of what client is saying. It's nothing wrong if we interpret it in our own understanding, what might this be, without making a judgment or without making it client's reality. So from that sense, if you are to interpret what might be some potential underlying mental and emotional challenges Mike might be dealing with, I invite you to share this in a little group. Shanti, this time, how about we take about 3 minutes for the group and then 1 minute to come back. Let's go.
Sounds good. I'm opening the rooms now. Fifteen more seconds. I'm sure the time was less, but we'll co-create the space with Fernando now.
All right, coaches. So if you had very limited time to have the discussion, I hope that this is something that you can pick up with your colleagues, because it's an important discussion that we need to have, isn't it? Because we are here intentionally to create maximum value and impact in our clients. All right, so we are answering the question, what are some potential underlying mental and emotional challenges Mike might be dealing with? Anyone who would like to share the insights from your room?
Can share.
Go ahead.
So I was just sharing with my fellow coaches the incidents that I could recall. Few years back, I had a client who came to me from his office and on for enhancing the performance. And when I started working with a client, I remember that for almost 2 to 3 sessions, he was not ready to open up. He was in the space of that, you do whatever you can do. And then when gradually in 2 to 3 sessions, we could really build some trust. And when we could establish that relationship and he started to open up with few things. And then I could sense that this guy is working, speaking, telling me things and gradually getting opened up. But this is not the real thing that, there is something that I could sense out of, my experience or whatever you can say. And then in maybe after 6 to 7 sessions, I just got to know that he had a major breakup in his love relationships, like a 10-year-old relationship. And there he decided that, this is an end to my life. And it's I don't want to do anything. I don't want to progress. That was so internal. And then on consciously, he was saying that I really want to enhance my performance and I really want to grow in my life. But then internally, he was like totally closed. And I really could sense that, you know, he was also facing challenge, but I also had to face that challenge, that unless I mean, very purposely, I really had to initiate that, you know, conversation with his permission, that, you know, can we talk a little bit about your personal life and all, and then we could really work on that area and like got some results out of it.
Thank you, Shalini. What a wonderful story. And also, we all congratulate you for the success and how you approach the client. Thank you for sharing the story. So what I heard from your story is that there are certain external things that are visible to us. And then there are also internal forces that are not immediately visible to us. Now that since you approach it very mindfully, you are able to surface them and potentially support the client in moving forward. Great. So I think you are very much resonating with the story that I'm sharing with you. That's what I'm hearing from you. So let's move forward, coaches. Now, the surface, right? It's exactly what Shalini was sharing with us. Now, as a professional coach, you don't need to be trauma-informed to recognize when the client goes through such magnitude of issues or concerns in their life, we recognize there's some acute stress, there's some potentially chronic stress, and also potentially traumatic stress. Now, this is something we don't need to be necessarily a trauma-informed coach to know. Now, moving forward, now in trauma-informed coaching, we talk about many different layers of listening, right? So we call this deep listening, and let's listen to 3 types of layers of listening beyond the surface level, what the client telling us, and how to surface them sooner. Really, really soon, like within the first session, within the second session, how do we surface them? Okay, so let's now try to interpret what the client is saying. When we become a trauma-informed coach, we learn how to interpret trauma. So when we hear the client is a workaholic, we recognize there's some imbalance of focus in other important areas of his life. And then he's not able to manage his stress. That's why he's not balanced, right? Not balanced, and he's not managing his stress well. And we are recognizing, although he's a high achiever, where there is still a feeling of inadequacy. And he also he's also preoccupied with failure. If you notice, failing as a CFO, he said, right? And then he also says that food is his good place and he's overweight. Of course, in order for one to become overweight, it's not just only the food, but he's mentioning food is my happy place. So it gives us a little indication that he is focusing on a heightened reward mechanism around food. And this we can surface more while having a discussion rather than making quick judgments. And then he also say alcohol for sleeping. That means he's being unresponsible towards his health, especially if he's having alcohol every night for sleeping. And then procrastination indicates that he's unable to maintain optimal functioning. It's very simple and straightforward. And no energy for meeting and events means that he is avoiding social situations. Now, this is something we all can easily make sense based on what client shares with us. So this is the first layer of listening to the client. Moving forward, let's try to look into the deeper listening, the layer 2. Now, in layer 2, we need to recognize what is trauma. Well, trauma has a very broad definition depending on how they occur. There are many different types of trauma, and not even all types of trauma are even documented to begin with. But just to understand what trauma is, let's look at a very simple example. Have you ever seen a friend, a person in your life or yourself might be deadly scared of something, although you rationally know that you don't have to be afraid of? For an example, in this case, this child was attacked by a dog when the child was small, and it's very normal. The child felt very scared. And then what did our brain do? Our brain has coping and safety mechanisms. So brain recognized this is a threat. So let me save this information in my brain and my nervous system and my body, in my even to level of my DNA, so that next time when the same problem occurs, same danger shows up, I can get myself to safety. So it's almost like your body, your brain, your nervous system love you so much, it wants to store this important information. So the next time you can get yourself to safety faster. So when the person grew up, little boy grew up, and then while he's walking down on the road, there's someone walking a pet dog. But this person goes into a paralysis, not being able to do anything about it, and feels intense fear. Have you seen people like this? Or do you have anything like that, for an example? Now, for me, for an example, it's something to do with heights. If I'm in a height without a barrier, I can't even move my eyeballs, right? So we can relate, or we know someone who experiences this, right? And the interesting thing, coaches, is that this is an unconscious response. Now, this is something that we don't recognize. It is an unconscious response. That is why you would tell this adult, you don't have to worry about little dog. But you understand that logically, consciously, or cognitively, but you can't necessarily take actions based on that understanding. And that's what Shalini was telling us, right? Know what to do, but not possible to execute, not possible to break it down. Right. Now, these kind of responses we call trauma responses. So trauma responses are unconscious. Now, you know trauma responses already. Now, some classic trauma responses are fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fight is when we are constantly angry. It's very easy for us to get angry. Sometimes people say, I'm a tempered person. They even associate themselves with the fight response. Irritability, aggression, disappointment. You see sometimes it's in their characteristics, it's in their core that they're easy to be irritated, easy to be aggressive. Flight response. There's anxiety in them all the time. They worry about things. They fear things, panic, sometimes serious panic attacks. And you notice that they over worry for things that they shouldn't be. Sometimes you tell them, why are you always angry? Why are you always worrying? Don't be, there's nothing to worry about. They understand it, but they can't necessarily embody it. They can't make a change. Why? Because it is unconscious. Freeze response, immobilization, disassociation, disengaging from things. Sometimes, have you seen someone, while there's a pile of work, they just binge watch series, or they just get stuck in their mobile phone and keep scrolling. Now, this is disassociation. Immobilization is when someone was sexually assaulted or raped. During that experience, they said nothing. They said nothing to the perpetrators. Later on, people blame them. Why didn't you do something? Why didn't you say something? And the person says, I don't know. I was paralyzed. Now, this is freeze response. They isolate themselves. They often experience depression, and a way of disassociation is also compulsion, compulsive behaviors. Like I said, binge watching, eating, OCD, we call it. Fawn response is when we people please. We run around, help everyone, way beyond we should be doing. And we can say no. We prioritize others instead of ourselves. And to the extent sometimes we self-harm ourselves, right? And sometimes when we go out and we help people all the time, we call this, I am that kind of person. I love helping people. But there's a difference between helping people and then overly helping people. Now, these are classic trauma responses. What's important to remember is that these are unconscious. No matter how much you tell them, it's not within their conscious control. Now, where do they come from? Now, just like the little boy seeing the dog, now, according to CDC, there are many childhood adverse experiences. Now, these are just only 10. There are so many of them. Now, neglect, emotional, physical neglect, abuse, emotional, physical, sexual abuse, household challenges like mother treated violently or mother being violent, father being violent, substance abuse in someone in the household, mental illness in the household, and parental separation or always fighting. Weekends, parents fight and go away from each other. And incarcerated household member, someone is jailed or taken to the police or something like that. These are just very limited ones. There's so many of them. So these are childhood adverse experiences. Now let's look at some more prominent traumatic experiences. And the interesting thing is, when we, as children, when we experience trauma, we disassociate from them, and our brain has coping mechanisms which makes us forget them. And it's also similar to prominent traumatic experiences. There's so many. I have a lot here today, but let's look at a few uncommon ones. Have you thought about community violence as trauma? Have you thought about loss of a loved one as trauma? How about relocation? Have you thought that it can be traumatic? How about witnessing trauma? Watching, not just only witnessing actual trauma, but repeatedly seeing them in the television. You know how much the traumatic experiences that are being shared on media, not just these days, even growing up as children, we watch a lot of TV, and even in the movies, we see a lot of trauma. How about historical trauma, multi-generational trauma? Do you know that your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, those who fought wars, some of those trauma is passed on through their DNA to you, and you sometimes behave in a specific way. You don't even know, why am I struggling with that? I can't pinpoint to a specific reason, but it could be that it's not really yours. It's coming from one of your ancestors, for an example. We have 14 generations DNA within our body. So that means 14 people, 14, imagine the family tree, grandparents, great-great-grandparents, and going up, can be 9,000 plus people's traumatic responses in your body, and showing up depending on environmental conditions, depending on your age. So when the triggers show up, these get activated and you don't even know why. How about spiritual or religious trauma? We don't even recognize them because we are very strongly culturally conditioned. How about maternal trauma when you give birth? How about intergenerational trauma, like what we were talking about, ancestral trauma? And the list goes on. Right, now let's try to look at the second layer of listening. When someone has imbalanced focus on their important aspects of their life, that means they are disassociating some parts of their lives. So this is freeze response. Imbalanced stress management is because of the anxiety is so high that they can't necessarily manage stress to begin with. So this is the flight response. Feeling inadequacy, disappointment, they feel disappointed about themselves, fight response. Preoccupied with failure, this is over-worrying, this is flight response. And then compulsion to eat, and when we eat too much knowing that we shouldn't, that means we have crossed the line, we are self-harming. So this is freeze and fawn response both together. And then if you look further, unresponsible towards health, again, that means we don't necessarily care about ourselves. What that truly means is our cognition also, it's aware, subconsciously or unconsciously we are operated in a direction of self-harm. Disassociation once again, because when we sleep at night, when we consume alcohol, that means we want to kind of numb our brain. We don't want to process what happens during night in terms of rejuvenation of our brain. So disassociating from natural processes. So freeze and fawn both at the same time. And again, unable to maintain optimal functioning. Procrastination often comes from disassociation, depression, and isolation. That's why when people are depressed, they would rather prefer to keep eating, binge watching, or go through social media rather than doing other things or attending to what is important. And avoiding social situation, again, clearly is disassociation and isolation. So the freeze response, coaches. So you are recognizing now in Mike's case, it's not just one thing that's playing a role, it's complex things that are playing a role in his life. So these are the symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Now imagine that it's not just even related to one traumatic experience, it's related to many. So as a trauma-informed coach, when you hear all of these things, because you are deep listening and you're aware of trauma responses, you are able to interpret it and invite without judging and telling the client, you have this trauma responses, this trauma responses, this trauma response. You invite the client to interpret them and recognize the deeper causes of where it is coming from. And then actually this is a global problem. Do you know that approximately 70% of the global population has been exposed to a traumatic event at some point of their life? Now, this is excluding generational trauma. Imagine if we included them. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. And about 78% of the individuals who participated in the World Health Organization services that they have been affected by the trauma-related PTSD. Imagine that, coaches. And moving forward, how about the mental health, behavioral and physical effects? Now, remember earlier we talked about childhood adverse experiences, if not ACEs. If we have experienced more than 4 ACEs, there is high risk and high prevalence for depressive disorders, higher rates of substance abuse, high risk-taking behavior, obesity, diabetes, heart disease. And do you know that if an individual has more than 6 ACEs, that there's estimation of them dying 20 years earlier compared to someone with no ACEs. Now, in my case, I have about 14 to 15 different types of ACEs that I remember. Now, imagine that. Moving forward, so when we go to the layer 3, we can go even further than just recognizing the trauma responses, unconscious trauma responses. Now, we know that often when we look at a person, we see this one person, just one unit. But is it really one unit? The truth is, we are not just one unit. We are very complicated, complex systems, and they can be millions of systems. And in fact, even though we call ourselves advanced human beings, we don't know all the systems that are within ourselves fully to begin with. And what you see on the screen are just a few of them, the most obvious ones. So let's look at some systems. Now, in order for us to recognize deeper layers of traumatic responses, it's important that we dive deeper with our clients. Now, this is where the traditional coaching frameworks are not enough. Because in traditional coaching frameworks, we have to go forward with the client. We are not necessarily focusing on going back, root causes, right? Our focus is moving forward. Why? Because we need to work with healthy individuals. But did you just notice the survey results? Over 78% of the world population is experiencing PTSD at some point in their life. So always having this idea of moving forward, unless we have really made sure that our clients are absolutely healthy individuals, is not realistic. We also need to learn to go back with clients. Because we are very strongly following our professional boundaries, we don't go back in with clients because some of us don't have the qualification or the understanding of how to interpret root causes. And that is why being informed of trauma can be valuable in recognizing root causes of our clients. So some of these problems, feeling like stuck, feeling suffocated, never-ending work, cannot find love, certain behavior, image, all these things. So we go deeper with the client. The deeper we go with the client shares with you with the right setting, right confidentiality, that as a child, I was neglected. The childhood is. I was physically abused by my parents because they thought the best way of disciplining me and making me educate myself is by physically punishing me. And I didn't trust my parents because I was afraid of them. I didn't feel safe around them. So I ended up finding emotional connection elsewhere. And unfortunately, I was sexually abused by someone within my systems. And Mike also says that as a result, I couldn't relate to my peers. So I developed social anxiety at a very young age, and I grew up with social anxiety. Now, these are just only few ACEs that one could experience. And often, when we come from adverse backgrounds, we experience much more adversities growing up, and also in adolescence. And as adults in this competitive world, we often experience trauma, and we often tell ourselves, yeah, it's a normal thing. It happens to everyone. I shouldn't worry about it. And the society has conditioned us not to focus on them. rather to continue to move forward. And also our education systems, unfortunately, lack trauma education. Now, I told you, we need to go even deeper, right? So a trauma-informed coach is able to go even deeper to recognize what are his real problems here. Now, let's look at the survival mechanisms. Now, when we are faced with the danger, we have coping mechanisms against survival mechanisms, right? So we recognize the threat, and all of a sudden, the right chemicals are released into our body, in this case, cortisol. And our heart rate starts to build up, and our the processes, our body gets ready so that we can get ourselves to the safety. And then this is acute danger, acute stress, just incidental, and we get ourselves to safety. And this information was important. We remember next time when we see a snake, we need to act fast. This is great. This is very important. Now, this is not necessarily considered as a very strong trauma response. But let's look at something more interesting. If you look at Mike's case, we know that some level there's acute stress, there's chronic stress, there may be some, no, now we know there's traumatic stress, because why? We recognize he had been through many adversities as a child. So when our body unconscious, remember, this is unconscious. We might not consciously remember them and process all the time, but our body loves us so much, our systems loves us so much, they are always present in our behavior. This is what we call conditioned behavior or trauma-induced behavior. So we behave based on our trauma. So for an example, when you see two people are fighting, sometimes even it is you go to the supermarket, you go to the laundry shop, there's something wrong and you become a bit angry, and then you raise your voice, you get little tempered, and then you come home and go like, why did I do that? I shouldn't have fired up like that. That's not me. That's not my core essence. You are absolutely right. You are not that person. It's the trauma responses showing up at that injustice, because there is the fight response in you. It's uncontrollable. It's unconscious. So you got angry and you had that situation. But that's not you. So when two people are fighting, it's not the two people are fighting. It's the trauma showing up. It's trauma responding to trauma. And imagine that. And imagine the number of wars in the world. So now in Mike's situation, Mike has all of these responses controlling him, and he has no idea that it's come from his childhood because it's unconscious, right? So he thinks it's normal, right? So there's cortisol in his body all the time because trauma is acting up all the time. There's a fight and flight response, but does he do anything? No, because he thinks it's normal. We all think, oh, a little bit of stress is all right, and it's normalized. So we do nothing about it. So we don't get ourselves to safety, right? So if you look at the reality, now there's stress. That means there's cortisol in our body. That means it's asking us, it's begging us to get ourselves to safety. But what do? Nothing, because we have normalized it. So there is no safety, right? So when there is no safety, our body is begging even harder. So it releases even more cortisol asking us to get ourselves to safety. But we live in an interesting time. Although human civilization has developed so fast, our bodies have not evolved yet in that same speed. What I mean by that is, if you just go out of your home, it's very easy for you to find food. If not, you just open the fridge, there's enough food. But the reality is, we didn't have food that easily if we look back 50 years or 100 years. At some point, we were hunter-gatherers, which means when we had food, we had to stock it up. And still, a lot of animals do this. Like for an example, bears, they can hibernate with the food that they have in their body as fat cells, and it breaks down during the hibernation. And in fact, human beings are also capable of doing this. So in our body, the more food we take, it thinks, okay, I might need to save this food. I might not get food for another week, another 2 weeks. These are biological mechanisms. So what do? We store that body fat in ourselves so that we can reuse it at a later time. So now how does this act up in Mike? Very much like the fishbowl. The brain doesn't understand danger. Sorry, our systems, our unconscious mind, subconscious mind doesn't understand the danger the same way our conscious mind understands it. It's committed to safeguarding us, right? So what does it do? So there is danger, but Mike is not getting himself to safety. So the innocent body, Mike's body thinks, let's start collecting body fat in case if he is not going to be able to go out there and find food during the hibernation, he can have enough food. I can break down the fat cells. So when there's more cortisol in our body, now the body is asking for more food. So what do? Excessively eating. And that means we are teaching our body to create quick rewards. Dopamine. We like quick rewards because it makes us feel good in the short term. What does that mean? We want more quick rewards. That's why we love having snacks. That's why Mike loves having junk food all the time. So when we go through this cycle, there is obesity, there's anxiety, and there's depression, which caused him to arrive at that mini stroke. Now it becomes very clear. Now, as a trauma-informed coach, you have this knowledge. You are able to recognize where this body fat comes from, where his obesity comes from, where these problems, where this chain of reactions leading one to the other as a domino effect. Now, remember where I started? He said stress, reason procrastination, avoid meetings and events, no drive. So at that very moment, as a trauma-informed coach, you are able to recognize, there seems to be acute stress, some level of traumatic stress, and also chronic stress. And moving forward, how I would like to address this is, there are almost like invisible chains or invisible voice in our subconscious mind, unconscious mind, telling us how to behave without us knowing. So we have specific behaviors, specific habits, specific way of behaving, and even identifying with them and say, I'm a loner. I'm a hot-tempered person. Oh, I like to have a little smoke every now and then or every night before I get myself to sleep. Well, I love enjoying life with I love eating. We only live now, right? So I like to eat junk food. We associate ourselves without recognizing where they come from. It's almost like although we have even forgotten this trauma that happened to us, we are bound by invisible chains to those traumatic experiences. And even now we are being controlled, not just once or twice a year, not just once or twice a month, not just once or twice a day. At all times, we are habitually controlled by these invisible voices that are within ourselves because of what happened to us as kids and growing up. Remember the previous self-reflection? We asked, when client is not achieving desired level of success, do you notice frustration or disappointment in your clients? Now, I believe if this information is new to you, your heart, your mind become a little bit more empathetic. You become a little bit more compassionate to recognize, now I see why that they feel that frustration and disappointment, why they are unable to take actions. Because they are unconsciously controlled. It's beyond their control. No matter how committed they are, no matter how interested they are in actually creating success and development, there's something blocking them. There's those invisible wounds. There are those invisible chains and invisible noises in their head. And perhaps if you feel frustration or disappointment, and this is an invitation for you not to be. The reason is it's not within your control. If client can't control it, how can you do that? You are an amazing coach. You are a great coach, but there's a limit that you can help your client, right? If you're not a therapist, if you're not trauma informed, you are unable to truly help client recognize these things. So it's understandable, right? So this brings us to a very important thing to remember. People who are affected by trauma experience strong guilt, shame, and disappointment. They can't even explain why they feel guilt. Sometimes our clients experience, someone asks, can you do this? Sometimes they do it because they feel guilty to say no. Sometimes in a relationship, we are stuck in a toxic relationship. We keep serving the phone response. We keep serving. And if we said no, and if we put ourselves first, we feel guilty. And then if we said no, we feel shame. Why did I do this to my partner? We find ourselves being disappointed. It's because it's unconscious. We can't control it. So this is how your clients feel when they come to your coaching sessions without having achieved the success or the undertaking homework actions they undertook, right? And interestingly, you as a professional coach, you are committed to their process. And we know as coaching competency, we like to gently challenge our clients. With nurturing care, we'd like to challenge our clients. We'd like to provide feedback to our client. We'd like to encourage our clients. You can say, you can do it. I believe in you. But can client believe in themselves? They cannot. So they go in this cycle of trying hard, try again, but they fail. And this is counterproductive to the client. So that means we are now re-traumatizing the client. And it inflicts more harm to the client than actually helping the client. So you are recognizing if 78% of the people in the world, according to WHO, are identified with PTSD, trauma responses, trauma symptoms, right? When we try to cheerlead our clients and challenge them to success, we might be doing harm to them. So it's a very fine line when we challenge, when we support our clients in a way towards helping them to move forward and helping them to go from where they are to the future. So I would say it a little bit like this. If you are tasked with revitalizing a tree that is dying, you would first think, okay, to revitalize the dying tree, I need to water it. I need to bring fertilizer into it. I need to make sure it gets enough sunlight so that it can thrive. So you do all of that, like what you do with your clients. And then little while you go like, why is this tree not really thriving? Then you go like, wait a second, there might be something wrong with the roots. Let me look into the roots. So you dig a hole and you check the roots and you find out the roots are rotten or there are pests. Then you recognize, oh, it's not about the sunlight or water. It's actually about the root pests or the malfunctioning of the roots. So now you work with the roots first. When you rejuvenate the roots, the tree starts to vitalize itself. So then we recognize that just like a tree, when we want to revitalize our clients, help them to move forward in their life with success, sometimes it's not just about coming up with actions. It's not about coming up with deeper reflections, having amazing aha moments, and afterwards coming up with a very powerful set of actions and accountability. It's not enough. Why? Because everything I said, right? Reflection, coming up with actions, trying to execute them with a plan of action and accountability are also all cognitive. They are all in the thinking brain, the cerebral cortex, the cortex that's outside. But how about the subcortical brain, the inner part of our brain? And that is truly who we are. That's what makes us control us. That's what is who we are deeply, that's how we are deeply controlled. So then what we really need to do is enabling the client to recognize that so that the client is able to work with their root causes and then moving forward. Of course, as a trauma-informed coach, you will not be able to provide therapy, but you will be surprised, coaches. There are so many therapeutic modalities that you as a coach can use with healthy clients or clients who are not diagnosed with a specific mental condition. There are so many of them, right? So if you have the right knowledge as a trauma-informed coach, there's a possibility that you can go deeper with your clients. Of course, at the same time, you might have a very strong screening process. At the very beginning, you screen the client, you recognize the trauma responses, and you tell the client, hey, I'm noticing trauma responses in you, so I'm not able to undertake you. So you need to either go to a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, or to a trauma-informed coach. I only work with healthy individuals. So maybe that's your undertaking. Now that's completely a different story, right? All right, so with that, I would like us to go to another group reflection. So based on what you already knew, and maybe certain things that you restated, and maybe some new information that you heard today, what are your insights and key takeaways? And I think we have some good time. How about we take about 6 minutes of a breakout session?
Sure.
Hi.
Hello.
Let me turn on.
Okay, there are several people who weren't assigned. I'm assigning them now.
Oh, sure.
We started at 7:41, right?
All right, coaches. So welcome back. I hope you had some great insights sharing, and I'm dying to know your insights. So I look forward to hearing from some of you before we end the session. And so what we will do is let's do a few due diligence, and then we will be able to invite you to share as many insights as possible. So there was a question in the chat room, which is this similar to amygdala hijack? Absolutely accurate. Now, if you were to debrief that a little bit, what is happening is that when there's a strong trigger, now when we want to get ourselves to safety, what happens is we need to either fight or flight initially. So in order for us to do that, what happens? All the attention goes into the amygdala. When amygdala is very strongly activated, that means it receives all the blood flow and it's hyperactivated in a way that our prefrontal cortex is unable to make the rational thinking, is unable to do the social cognition, use the social cognition, which means that's what we mean by sometimes a panic attack. Sometimes when we stand up to speak, all of a sudden we get a panic attack. Or sometimes road rage. You're on the road, someone does something, and all of a sudden it hijacks our amygdala and we behave in an irrational way. Like when you have experienced a panic attack, you can come back and say, why did I behave like? There's no reason. There's nothing to be afraid of. Because it's an unconscious response that's happening in your brain. Your amygdala got hijacked, if not got all the attention, the blood flow flew into it, so that our prefrontal cortex was not clear. I would like to actually extend this a little bit more, just to help you understand how serious this can be in prolonged or in the prolonged abuse. Now, let's say if we as a child grew up in an environment where there was someone who was either emotionally neglecting us, physically abusing us, or sexually abusing person, you notice that what happened in the jungle with the snake. Once you saw the snake, amygdala received that that signal. So amygdala decided to get ourselves out of jungle. Now, out of that danger. So that would mean our heart rate increased, our temperature, motor control, all of them optimized, so we can get ourselves quickly out of that danger. Now imagine, what if the snake is showing up all the time? The person who is sexually abusing the child is always in the environment. That means the child is feeling that fight and flight response all the time. That would mean the child start building the early childhood anxiety from that very young age. The reason being, the fight and flight is always activated. Now we talk about the heart problems, obesity problems as we are abused as kids, and then later on we develop this kind of certain ways of being, right? This is because our body is now got used to it over a long period of time being around the specific threat and the danger. Now you are then recognizing earlier when we said, if someone has experienced more than 6 adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, their life time could be reduced in 20 years. Does that make sense now? Because their amygdala was firing all the time, and that affected their heart, that affected their body in the long run, so that they were not able to truly prolong their life as a healthy individual. And also, just to add one more thing to it, imagine now when our amygdala is firing all the time, what happens in the other parts of the brain? Let's think about hippocampus for an example, which is responsible for learning, memory forming, and developing right emotions. Now, when our amygdala is always firing because the perpetrator is around us, the body focus more on the amygdala function rather than the hippocampus function, which means not enough blood will go into the hippocampus. That means we will identify ourselves with difficult to remember, difficult to study, difficult to form right type of emotions. And imagine growing up in the long run with the same situation. So that's when we think that we are stupid or we have learning disabilities. But the truth is we lived in an adverse environment with the perpetrator always firing our amygdala so that we couldn't truly grow. And in fact, this is neurological, which means when you don't receive enough attention and enough amount of blood into your hippocampus, it doesn't grow to the actual size an adult should have it. Imagine that. So the adversities can neurologically impact us. So that is the seriousness of adversities and trauma. And when you become a trauma-informed coach, you learn all of this deep knowledge so that you can work with your clients. All right, coaches. So I hope I answered that question and provided you a few more insights. With that, I would like to quickly make an announcement so that we will not have to rush at the end. One thing I would say, we need to be very careful if we are using this kind of words in our coaching, which is, one second, I think, here, this one. If we say we are delivering integrated, holistic, and transformational coaching, you recognize integrated means we should be able to integrate trauma knowledge into it. And holistic means also integrating clients' traumatic experiences. And transformation only can happen if we can penetrate through clients' subconscious and unconscious understanding of things and help them rewire. So if we are using these words, we need to be careful. Otherwise, we might end up in disappointment, both client and yourself. So with that, I want to invite you to think. Now, this webinar is Unveiling Blind Spots of Client-Coach Relationship. And now you're starting to see how much we might not see if the client is experiencing trauma responses or symptoms, and if we are not aware of how trauma works. And with that, this is a series of the first webinar. And on the 19th of August, with ICF Bangalore chapter, we look forward to sharing with you coaching beyond the conscious mind, the transformation element of it, using psychedelic integrated coaching. So with that, now I would like to invite some of you to share the insights that you discussed in your breakout room. Shall we hear from Bakhtiar?
Yes, Fernando. Let me, first of all, thank you very, very much for such a fantastic presentation, including your explanations and the amount of knowledge and information packed in the short webinar, and the imagery, very nicely presented. Thank you. Added so much to my knowledge, I can say for myself. And, you know, the trauma at various levels, as you described, can show up in so many different ways. And it is up to us as coaches to try to unravel what is inside. And the success, of course, will depend on so many factors. But thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Bakhtiar. Kenneth, would you like to go next?
Surely. Thanks, Fernando. It was a lovely session. I think the key insights that came out, and I was discussing it with my breakout room buddy as well, with him, about the fact that in our initial contracting conversations that we have with clients, sort of follow through on the ICF diktat, right? To differentiate for them what coaching is and how it's different from training, consulting, and counseling. And when I now look back at it through this lens, it allows me to understand how it could impact the client's comfort to be able to share a trauma of this kind. If there is something that's holding them back, that zero session conversation that we had, saying that, okay, anything about your past is, you need to speak to a counselor, you need to speak to a therapist, and it shouldn't really be something that you bring into a coaching session, could actually impact them in bringing that forward, even though it might be affecting their ability to move forward on their coaching objectives. It might be impacting the way they see themselves or they see their objective itself. So I think what I've learned is definitely need to have a more sensitive approach to how I talk about what coaching is and what we cover within its scope, and give an open space for the client to be able to talk holistically about themselves, rather than just saying that, okay, you're only the sum total of your objectives that you want to work on.
Thank you, Kenneth. Your insights are very inspiring, and I'm so very glad that you are embodying some of these insights into your practice immediately. And that's what I was hoping, and I'm glad to see that it's happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I share, please?
Shalini, over to you.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much. Whatever you've shared today, I can relate to, or I should say resonate to each and every word that you said. But I've been always thinking like this since I've been practicing coaching for almost a decade, that we almost say that we are coaches, we have nothing to do with your past, and it's all a job of a therapist and all of that. I mean, I think thanks to some NLP training that I had, and I know about these conscious and subconscious, and I, in a tricky way, I ask my clients, so would you like to tell me something else? I mean, something happened before. So just likewise, I could really, able to dig little more deeper and could reach to that. But with my experience, I can say that more than 90% of the clients have something or the other in their childhood, in their past, which is kind of, stopping them. Now, if we really do not penetrate, I think it would be very, very difficult to really break the shell that they, or the mask that they come with. So, I mean, I can really not one, just, I mean, so many incidences with my clients and the, conversations really were just going in my mind that, how they were talking something else, and how we could really find out that what was there, happened in the childhood was the major reason for they being this way and not able to really get their results. So, I mean, thank you so much. This is an eye-opener for me, that now if ICF also says that, we can really coach them in a holistic way or in the integrated way, I mean, nothing like it. I mean, it has to be that way. I think a lot of coaches could be, holding themselves for asking such questions related to past. But if we can really do so, I think will be like a lot of coaches will also get to success with their clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini, for sharing your ideas and also your confirmation. Like you said, 90% of your clients have these adverse experiences. So that validates that we all have a common experience. And since respecting your time, I'm so humbled once again to be in this space. Thank you very much for hosting me, ICF Bangalore chapter. And coaches, thank you for joining me today. I'm very humbled. Thank you very much. I look forward to keeping in touch with you. And over to you, Shanti. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Fernando.
you. Thank you, Fernando.
Fernando, the
Thank you.
chat is full with gratitude and appreciation for how the session went by. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is another session in between the next session of Fernando on 5th, which is cross-generational coaching, will come to you very shortly. And looking forward to session 2, Fernando. There is lots of interest already, I can see. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Shanti, we look forward to the recording of this one. I'd love to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye for now.